This is the On the Pony Express podcast, part of the On3 network. Check out all the SMU coverage you need at ontheponyexpress.com. Now, here's your host, Billy Embody. 1, 2, 3, let me go.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. I'm Billy Embody. Thanks for listening. We are going to dive right into SMU, FSU in just a moment. But before we get to that, got to remind you guys, we are presented by our friends at StatusJet, statusjet.com. David Henry and his team. You heard from David last week going into the FSU game about what they can do for you now that the away schedule is here for football and the basketball schedule coming out as well. Perfect opportunity for you to reach out to them. Statusjet.com, mention ontheponyexpress.com, and use the code PonyUpACC if you're asked for it. Get your discount on your round trip flight. Talk to your family, your friends, your coworkers, your clients, whoever might want to go to an SMU game. Do it in style with our friends at StatusJet. They'll take care of you from anything you could possibly ask for on your trip, and they can get you there safe and sound on top of that. So reach out to them today. Get your estimates for the rest of the road schedule and more from our friends at statusjet.com. Hayden, it was a massive weekend on the Hilltop. And from the weather to the result of the game, the pregame pageantry, the postgame celebration, all the coverage of SMU Florida State, the first ever ACC game, it was incredible. And for SMU fans, they got treated to a great game. But around all of that, the atmosphere on the Hilltop was just incredible overall.
Man, this game certainly lived up to the hype that SMU was expecting. You know, going back 30 years ago, we needed a day like Saturday to kickstart our new era of playing power conference football. But before even going into the game, man, the Boulevard was great. Billy, thanks for getting me into your little seafood boil down there. I'm finally understanding what makes the Boulevard great. You know, we had former President George W. Bush. He flipped the coin for the game, which is always special. He did that twice in my career, and just to have the 43rd president of the United States around is unreal. I actually met him off the field when I was just in class at SMU. I had to take an art history class, and I'm in the art museum, and really just a lot of guys in suits are walking through, and emerges President Bush, and he recognizes me, walks over, is like, "How you doing, big boy?" You know, and we talk about SMU football for a minute. So I like to call the former president one of my friends, but in reality, I mean, he's just a awesome guy, superstar, you know, super humble. So glad he's part of our university. And then Eric Dickerson was guest of the game, flipped the coin. In the locker room post-game, he said he's literally been waiting for this day 30 years. So always special to have him on the Hilltop. Bryson DeChambeau was hanging around as well. And look, if you'd have told me at the beginning of the season we'd be 4-1, I'd be ecstatic. You know, our one loss is to a BYU team who looks like a top 2 team in the Big 12, by the way, but we'll get to that later in Coast to Coast. And we talked in a group chat about our earliest SMU memories after the game, like on Sunday when we were all kind of just reliving the day before and talking about how great it was. I mean, guys, memories are 2018 Tulsa, where we lose and have a losing season. 2015, a 2-win season. My earliest memory of SMU is 2016, we lost a cold Saturday night game to USF, and I'm literally sitting on a pizza box, you know, with maybe 10,000 people in the stands, envisioning what I had hoped would come to fruition, and it certainly did on Saturday night.
Yeah, and I was asked about it on ACCPM, and I mean, this is up there in terms of the memories for any SMU fan. You know, not only you got TCU last week, but you've had, you know, SMU beating number 2 Texas in the Pony Express days. But to do it in your first ever ACC game against the defending champs, regardless of their record, that was so special. You know, they didn't have a coaching change. They didn't have this happen, and all of a sudden they're gutted. They just aren't a good football team, which we'll talk about, but they have those dudes on the other side that could have changed the course of SMU's night if they had played up to their potential. But instead, it was all about SMU creating that incredible memory for so many fans for years to come.
No doubt. I mean, I think if we'd have won the last 2 games by a combined 2 points, we'd be happy. But here we go. We boat raced both of them, TCU and Florida State, in back-to-back weeks. I mean, you can't get any better than that. And what makes it sweeter is Florida State is in process of suing the ACC for allowing SMU into the conference. So I was doing some reading and I was reading the lawsuit, and just a couple points stood out to me. Point 106 is, and I quote, "The Big 12 has repeatedly passed over membership for longtime football college school located in its home state of Texas, SMU. Even though the Big 12 recently invited 3 other members from SMU's conference, the American Athletic Conference, which has never been considered a Power 5, soon to be Power 4 conference." Point 116 says the additions of Cal, Stanford, and SMU were made over the strenuous objections of Florida State and other ACC member institutions. The ACC also tapped SMU, and then they go on to talk about, again, never been in a Power 5, Big 12's passed on them. And then finally, quote, point 117, simply stated, rather than improve its football media profile, the ACC consciously chose to diminish it, along with undermining the ACC's strength of schedule potential, end quote. So if you didn't have enough motivation already, the school we're playing is naming us in a lawsuit on why we don't even belong on the field with them. And then it's hard to talk about strength and schedule when you're 1-4, and so beating the brakes off of Florida State is something that everyone is excited, but also a little bit relieved, because when a school talks the way that they had, I mean, it would only add more fuel to the Florida State fire if we had laid an egg on Saturday night. So look at the status of the programs now. SMU is obviously on the rise. Florida State is one of those teams that's good once every 10 years and talks like they're a blue blood in college football. And they are, but they only have spurts. They can't do it consistently.
And for SMU, I mean, you have to use all of those things like Coach Lashley says, not emotional, passionate. And I think when you look at what they did to TCU last week before Florida State, they had to move on from what was an emotional aftermath because they played with passion. And, that was one of your keys to the game. And I thought SMU handled it perfectly overall.
For sure. Rhett challenged this team to raise the standard after the big emotional win last week, and the team came through. I mean, they performed at a level that we had talked about. If we were going to win this game, it was going to be a 1-possession, maybe a 10-point game. And really, once we came out of the second half, I mean, there was no question we were going to start the bus early for Florida State. Regardless of how their season is going, at the end of the day, they are a legendary logo in college football. They have a ton of talent. Their guys are big. They can run. But it's not about the size of the dog in the fight. It's about the size of the fight in the dog. And SMU clearly just wanted it more on Saturday night. And so you talked about my keys to the game. That was one of them, was move on from TCU. The other 2 keys that I had were we had to smother the struggling Florida State offense. I mean, Florida State they tied the game 7-7 on their first possession. And I think a lot of people were like, ooh, this could get scary, because I think that Florida State is eventually going to wake up at some point. They're going to have to finally put it all together. But defense bowed their necks. They didn't allow another point until the third quarter if you take away the safety for the high snap. And then finally, my last key to the game was we had to dominate the run game. We had to force Florida State to be one-dimensional on offense, and we definitely did that. We had 200-plus yards rushing for the second week in a row. Only 73 yards rushing for the Noles, and they had to start throwing the ball because they were down so much in the second half. DJ Uyunglele, he couldn't complete the deep balls that they needed to keep Florida State in the ball game. He had a abysmal performance on Saturday night. 12 for 30, 222 yards, a 13.2 quarterback rating, because you add 3 interceptions on top of that. His chances of being an NFL quarterback are going down the drain with this 2024 campaign, and I think Florida State is going to look to the backup this next week.
Yeah, and when you look at what that passing attack brought to the table, brought very little outside of the wheel route. Funny enough, I kind of made fun of it a little bit that Florida State couldn't defend it. Well, they were able to get some of that going on their own. And at the end of the game, Brock Glenn comes in and SMU is able to still get pressure. I think I saw a stat somewhere that I think SMU forced 9 straight incompletions, including an interception returned for a touchdown by Kobe Wilson. And whether it was Brock Glenn at the end or whether it was DJ Uyunglele most of the way, Florida State was almost, them being in the game at times was almost kind of built on a house of cards. They got that safety at the end of the first half, which, brutal play, but is what it is in a sense for SMU after Florida State gets stuffed at the goal line. And, they responded by forcing a turnover in the second half off DJ Uyunglele. They hit the tight end right in the hands and it pops up and they take it. But, I think for me, this game never, as soon as SMU scored on that opening possession, and kudos to the offense for getting it done, it was really there wasn't even there was nervous energy in the crowd. I kind of felt that, but I wasn't watching that game saying, when's the shoe going to drop for SMU, because they already showed that they could compete right from the start.
Yeah, it was really fun to watch these guys go out, drive the field early, and score a touchdown. And that's what's been key for this offense is getting points early. We talked about it. We didn't do that the first 3 games of the year, and we've been able to these past 2 weeks. And when we can keep that up throughout the season, you can score first and play from ahead. It really opens up the playbook on offense, and it allows defensive guys to play free where they're not having to be like, well, we can't give up another score. This is going to be a 2-score game. And so it's one of those deals when we're able to keep that up, and hopefully we can this weekend on the road. It's going to be crucial. We're going to have a lot of success doing that.
And when you look at having success, it starts with that fast start. And SMU's been able to do that with Kevin Jennings at the helm. And, just everybody's got to, we talked about last week, kind of going on a little bit of like a revenge tour and calling people out a little bit here and there for some takes after the BYU game. But you got to give Kevin Jennings his flowers. I mean, he was in control pretty much from start to finish, didn't look phased at all, and was able to have a dominant showing against FSU.
He's calm, cool, and collected, and that's what I love about him. There's this joke going around that after he won the state championship and after he won the American Conference championship and even after TCU, he doesn't really show emotions in his pictures. And that's kind of how he plays on the field. He's just really consistent. He doesn't ride the roller coaster. So he threw for 254 yards this week. So that was something that we talked about on the previous week of, hey, we might want to see some more yards out of Kevin, but as long as he stays consistent, he takes his completions, he's going to be fine, and it shouldn't matter what his yards are. Well, the last 2 games, he's been 30 for 42, which is a 71% completion percentage, 391 yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions through the air. So we challenged our passing game. We needed guys to develop more, and guys came up big. We didn't lean on one wide receiver this week. It was a total group effort. Nobody had more than 3 receptions, but 6 different guys had at least 2. And so Kevin is able to spread that ball around. RJ Maryland had a pair of touchdowns, which frankly, I'm relieved. It was one of those deals that after the Nevada game, we kind of didn't hear from him for a little bit. And it was one of those deals of, are they going to be able to get him going again? And fortunately he did. Jordan Hudson, he caught a touchdown for the 2nd straight game on the flea flicker. And I love the play call. I mean, you aren't going to be able to win a championship based off of trick plays, but it sparked the offense and what was looking like it was going to be a defensive battle at that point, as both defenses had really settled in. And then offensive line, I thought, played pretty good, but they gave up 3 sacks, which unfortunately is something that's going to happen when you play better and better teams. And that is something that we're going to have to take going forward of a point of improvement. Kevin is mobile. We just got to give him time. So he's going to run around and use his legs, but he just needs to be able to avoid the rush and us give him a clean pocket.
And he was sacked for the first time, I believe, this season in those moments when he did get those sacks in his face. Some of them were maybe a little bull rush up the middle, or a guy got free in the middle, and I felt like he had time on it, maybe 1 or 2 of them to get rid of the ball. But when you have those big bad dudes coming at you like that, I mean, it's hard sometimes. Preston experienced that against BYU, but for Kevin, this is that first moment of adversity. I felt like he took some hits as well against Florida State and bounced back up. And again, that goes back to him always being steady, and he spread the ball around, which was good. They did it without Romello Brinson at wide receiver or LJ Johnson. Brashard Smith also went out for a bit there, which probably had everybody. I don't think anyone really noticed until he just wasn't in there for a while. And instead, he came back and just continued to absolutely go on his dark horse Heisman type of tear.
For sure. Yeah, Kevin's tough, man. But as far as the offensive line goes, let's not get it twisted. These defensive linemen that we just went against, they're going to be in NFL camps next fall. They're big enough. They're bad enough. They got enough talent where regardless, some NFL GM is just going to give them a shot just to see what they got. But I think right now in pass pro, we're pressing. We're not really letting the game come to us. We're getting beat immediately rather than trying to die slow. And I understand trying to throw your hands and be aggressive in pass pro and stop the rush at the line of scrimmage. But there comes a point where you're going to have to be a little more conservative and maybe throw your outside hand, but clamp your inside hand. And so something I go back to about overthinking one-on-one pass rush is we played at Cincinnati my senior season. They were number 4 team in the country, very good at the point. The guy I was playing against, he was an all-conference player. I was an all-conference player. It was going to be a really, really good battle on Saturday. And so I go through my film study. I go throughout the week like I always do. And something I was able to realize, because I'm a guy that watches the games kind of as they go. I start with the first play of the game and I go all the way to the end. And then obviously I'll break up my rush and things like that. But the very first time I watch it, it's just going to be literally how did the game start and how did the game end? And something that I discovered was the guy that I was going to be going up against, he hit a chop rip the first third down of every game. The last 2 years, that was his first move every game. And so going into the game, I was like, you know what? I'm going to throw a fake punch on this guy. I'm going to try to bait that chop rip out. I'm going to throw a fake punch and I'm going to get him. And sure enough, we go out there for the first series, and sure enough, he comes out on my side when it's 3rd and long, and I'm on the man side. So I'm like, all right, here we go. I'm gonna throw this fake punch here, and I'm gonna win this rep. I take my set, I throw my fake punch, and he hits me with a fake chop rip where he really was playing 4D checkers or 4D chess at the time. And so it's just one of those things where if I'd have just gone with what I had done all season long and play my game, I'd have been fine. But when we start to overthink things, that's when you just get beat early, and you just got to kind of settle in and realize, hey, we're good football players too. We're on scholarship too. So you don't have to do too much. You don't have to press. You just have to settle in and play your game. Because Florida State, yes, they're good up front, but we're going to continue to face good fronts this season as we continue to play in the ACC.
Speaking of good fronts, you talked about giving flowers to Kevin Jennings for what he was able to do. This defense is unbelievable. I mean, quite frankly, to compare a little bit, you guys would have been AAC champions in 2019 with a little bit of a group of this guys. It's different times, different places, but they absolutely, I felt like, outside of some moments, whipped Florida State in the trenches, and it was just not close. It looked like Florida State was kind of like at times an out of shape, just clunky offensive line, and that's where the tone started, and it allowed the secondary and the linebackers to make all sorts of plays.
Defense wins championships, man. It's one of those deals. You can be great on offense, but if you don't have a defense, you're not going to be able to win a lot of games. And that really was the case in 2019. We had great players. We just didn't really have great scheme, unfortunately. And we gave up a lot of points where it really did turn into, all right, we got to score every possession or we're not going to win this game. And our defense giving up only 16 to Florida State, regardless of DJ Uiagalelei and what they're going through, that's impressive. This group responded, like I said earlier, after Florida State made it 7-7. And I didn't think you could force 3 turnovers and score a defensive touchdown every week, but this group is proving apparently you can. SMU leads the FBS 5 non-offensive touchdowns this season, 2 interception returns, 2 fumble returns, and 1 punt return. SMU's won the turnover battle 3-1 on Saturday night, and they're +7 turnover margin on the season, best for 9th in the country. And so we had 7 turnovers on offense so far this season. We can definitely improve on that. There's only 2 interceptions, but there were 5 fumbles, and unfortunately the muffed punts do count towards that stat. But man, as far as the turnovers go, we had multiple great interceptions. Jonathan McGill's diving interception in front of his home city, in front of his family, that was awesome. I felt so happy for him. Kobe Wilson, he had a beast quick return there. I mean, it looked like he was going down or he was going to step out of bounds or fumble. I mean, multiple times, and he just kept going. It was one of those deals where guys were texting me, and this is before my time. There was a running back for SMU named Chris Briggs, and he was an SMU running back. He wore number 24. He holds the all-time longest rush in SMU history with a 96-yard rushing touchdown in 2002. And guys were texting me, man, you got to talk about Chris Briggs. And then I saw today that Kobe was like, man, maybe I need to play running back. And with moves like that, I'm sure he could do anything. But Jalen Knighton has the second longest rushing touchdown of a 95-yarder. He had that last season. That's tied for the second longest. But then Ahmad Walker also added an interception that was tipped off the tight end's hands. And so 3 interceptions, and then DJ Uiagalelei could not hold on to the football. It seemed like there were multiple times the ball was on the ground. We're getting our hats on the ball. They're popping out. We weren't able to get one this week. But we keep playing like that, we will. And then you pair that with the fact, dude, we've allowed less than 65 rushing yards for the second straight week. You win a lot of ball games doing that. Defense is only allowing 88.8 yards per game rushing. That's good for 16th in the nation. Defense travels, and we're going to need them this week.
Yeah, indeed. For for SMU's defense, I think you're looking at a defense that is playing with so much confidence, and you really can't measure that, because when you look at this game and how it was built and all of the things that Florida State brought to the table, at least on paper. I asked Kobe Wilson after the game. I was like, was there any, you look across the field and how do you feel that out? And one of the more confident answers I've ever heard, and quite frankly, Kobe Wilson is becoming one of my favorite quotes on the team and guys to cover. He was like, I mean, basically, you can't measure what we have. You can't measure the mental toughness. You can't measure the preparation. You can't measure being, in your position and playing the way you need to, no matter if you're 5'11 like Kobe and Ahmad are, and both had interceptions. Ahmad Walker drew a penalty. One of the big Florida State offensive linemen got on him, and it was probably 6'5", 340 to 5'11", 220, whatever Ahmad is, and he was kind of like a little like water bug almost, just like fighting away, like getting away from him, and all of a sudden, boom! You could see it from the press box from my angle really really well. Just you knew that flag was flying, and it wasn't for anything else. It was for a holding. It negated a big run by Florida State, and for SMU, I mean, that's kind of their mentality. They play so much harder right now than their opponents, and they're going to have to keep that up. It's a hard thing to sustain. They're going to need another strong showing like that. Just give it, one more week, and Rhett Lashley will have them through this next quarter of their season. And if they play like that with that energy that they did against Florida State, it's going to be good times ahead for this defense against Louisville.
Yeah, I think the mentality, if you want to sum it up to one series, is the goal line stand. DJ Uiagalelei is 6'4", 252. That is a defensive end in the American Conference. And they had 2 straight rushes on the 2-yard line, and we held strong and we shut it down, which was awesome. Guys were taking his legs out. I mean, guys are flying around, dominating their offensive line. I mean, that is fun to watch. I mean, everybody's biting their nails when Florida State, of all teams, is on the 2-yard line. And when we're able to have a serious defensive stand like that, you'll build on that throughout the season. It'll give you that confidence that when you get to we need a stop here, subconsciously Scott Simons will remember that, and he'll be able to call plays freely, and they won't have to play so tight.
And I mean, I don't really have too much else to add on the defensive side of things. I mean, they were just fantastic. I felt like all night. I mean, again, you talked about with SMU's offense, you're not going to win a championship, but all on trick plays. But I felt like Florida State, kind of similar to TCU, had some double moves, had some wheel routes, which take a minute to develop. And they were able to hit some things and get some plays. I felt like early in the game, DJ Uiagalelei was in a little bit of a rhythm. And then the pass rush just kind of warmed down. There were some key moments where he was able to deliver a strike, and, people were on the board were like, all right, time to make changes, make adjustments, do all those things, because this isn't going to fly. But it is a long football game, and I just felt like the pass rush just affected him, and eventually that had him second guessing things. It had him being off target, and SMU was able to take advantage.
Yeah, he was getting knocked around out there. I know the stat sheet is only going to show 1 sack, which was a combined half sack by a couple guys, but there were a lot of throws that weren't even close. I mean, he's throwing them out of the back of the end zone. He's throwing them 5 yards out of bounds. He's getting knocked around as soon as he's releasing the ball. Elijah Roberts has one that comes to mind where, while it doesn't officially go in the stat sheet as any kind of tackle or sack, that has to affect him and how he goes through his progressions. And all right, I got to get this ball out if my first read's not there. So the more we can do that, and you don't even have to knock a quarterback out of the game to affect the team. If you just affect his mental, then you're going to be able to take a toll on that team's emotional standpoint. But let's get to my MVP real quick. I wanted to give it to Kobe Wilson, but he does show up on the stat sheet a lot. I know he's a linebacker, and I still am going to give it to the guys who don't get a lot of attention, if you will. I'm going to give it to Logan Parr this week. 0 sacks, no hits, no quarterback hurries against some dudes up front, against some dudes who are physically monsters, like I said last week. He had a nice block where he kept his feet moving. He extended his upfield arm on a kick-out pull for the opening touchdown of the ball game, sprung Brashard Smith, and he did have a holding call, but everyone had something they had to improve on in this game in the offensive line room. I also thought PJ has played well, and he's elevated his game the last couple of weeks. He did have a sack, and that's what ultimately caused me to give the award to Logan. But the offensive line has definitely stepped up the last 2 weeks. I'm glad to see it, and I know they're going to continue to getting better.
My MVP. I mean, man, it's hard not to go with Brashard Smith, and I know he's the star and everything like that. But I mean, you total the amount of yardage that he did. You make that double move catch. It's a big deal. But I had to give it to KJ. I mean, he just was able to just pull the strings in the right way. And to add, like you mentioned about Kobe, I thought Jonathan McGill had a hell of a game too. What he was able to do out there, and that diving interception was huge. But I think this was a game where your quarterback needed to set you up for success. And I think he did that and more. I mean, he was able to just work just about everything they wanted to into the game plan. Again, second straight game, over 70% completion. He went 16 of 23, 254 yards. He added only 12 yards on the ground too, which kind of makes his night almost a little bit more impressive. I do think sacks are taken out of that. But he was really able to just do, kind of whatever he wanted in the passing game. There were some moments where, they didn't finish. It wasn't like TCU where SMU was not punting the football. But when you open with a touchdown, it sets the tone. 11 plays, 75-yard drive, 5:16 off the clock. Your quarterback, regardless of how much you run the football, has to be the guy that kind of sets that tone. And, KJ did that. And again, 70% completion percentage. If this is the type of performance that he's going to bring to the table, no turnovers, I'll add, you're looking at an SMU team that will have its own potential Heisman Trophy dark horse type to make it alongside Cam Ward. But you're going to have a quarterback who is so efficient. And again, we can look ahead. They're going to have a spot in Charlotte if they keep playing this way. I mean, there's just not there's Louisville, who will give them a really good test, I think, this weekend. I still think SMU can go and do it just based on what we've seen the last 2 weeks. And I think they're almost getting healthier, but we'll look ahead at Louisville, later this week. But, man, your quarterback being almost your most valuable player on offense. Right now, everything runs through Brashard Smith, but 70% completion percentage and all the things that he did, you've got to give, tip of the cap to him, for all of that.
And look, if it was 70% completion percentage and it was 3-yard passes through the air, that would be one thing. He was throwing some dimes.
Yeah.
I mean, the double move by Brashard, that was covered. The Florida State guy was all over him, and he still dropped it in the bucket, for Brashard to go get it. And yes, there were plays. Jake Bailey got wide open. He got loose in the secondary, but I think KJ did a great job going through his reads and just finding the open guy this week. That's something that I challenged him to develop, and De'Aaron King has done an excellent job with KJ of really building his confidence, building his quarterback play, not just his running play. And it's starting to come to fruition. And I saw De'Aaron the other day in the facility, and I didn't interview him or anything. I just told him, like, hey, man, great job. And he's like, oh, these guys make it easy. But that's just the guy De'Aaron is. When you get to know him the way I have, he's a very humble guy. He'll never admit it, but he's doing an awesome job. He's been a great addition to the staff.
100%. And look, it's not easy to balance a quarterback competition like he did during fall camp and during the early goings of the season, because he was able to really just pull the strings the right way. I think you see Preston being a captain before the game. You see him being excited for his teammates on the field. But that's a really healthy quarterback room. And I know in today's day and age of college football, people always want to assume that things are going to fall apart or things aren't going to be as good as they may appear, and all these different storylines behind the scenes. But it starts with the guys in the room, but then you have to have a quarterback coach who understands everybody in there. And I think he really does a good job of that. And it helps to be, right around, for Preston, he's kind of just a couple years older, I think. But He's just done a great job, and kudos to Kevin for all the hard work to set himself up to look this way as well.
Yeah, Preston, right before we started, I saw this Instagram post from him, and the quote is, "The success of others doesn't limit your own. Thankful for every step along this journey. God bless Dallas, Texas. God bless the Ponies." And it's just pictures of him from the game with his teammates, having a good time, being a captain, all that. That takes being a man. And that's really what college football is about, is developing young men. And when you can have guys like Preston, it would have been really easy for Preston to throw in the towel and be like, "I'm done, screw this. I'm not going to be a great teammate the rest of the season. I'm just going to hit the portal once this is all over." But you see him getting excited for Kevin. You see him getting excited for this offense. And that takes a lot of humility. And I'm happy that we have him, man. Honestly, he's a great addition to the locker room still. Guys still love and respect him. But you still have to give props to KJ. I mean, KJ handled it well. De'Aaron King handled it well. I think Rhett Lashley has handled it well now. And they're doing a great job.
Yeah. I mean, what a win. I mean, any other closing thoughts? I know you were down on the field there with Bo Morris, our friend of the program, and taking it all in. How do you feel as a former player? I know you got a chance to take a look at the Boulevard a little bit closer this past weekend, but being in the stadium all the way to the end, I mean, what's that like?
Super proud, honestly. There were a ton of former players down on the field, definitely more than when I was playing. You just have guys that want to be around the program now. We had guys, Xavier Jones was down there, Delano Robinson was down there, Pat Jones was down there, who was a guy that kind of took me in as a freshman, and he was a sophomore and he always hung out with us freshmen. So it's always great to see Pat Jones. But it's just one of those deals where those are your brothers. You're going to remember that, and you're going to talk about things like 2019 we talked about on the sideline there. You're going to talk about that forever, But as far as the new Ford Stadium and the new environment and all that, Bo Morris was blown away. I mean, because he hadn't obviously been to a game yet, living in Florida and all that. He was like, "I cannot believe this." And him and I went up into the Gary Weber end zone complex during halftime and got some food, did all that. It is unreal up there during a game, which super happy for the program. It's just one of those deals where, yes, I'm jealous. I snuck up and saw the whole players portion of the facility. I saw the meeting room. I saw the locker room. But those guys deserve it, man. I mean, the guys that have been there for 4 years, they deserve it. The guys who are just now getting there, they're freshmen. Those are the guys that I'm like, man, you guys are so spoiled, but still happy for the program.
Yeah, no doubt. Really special weekend on the hilltop. And I just feel like, hey, you got a month away. When they come back for homecoming, early predictions, they're going to be, they're going to have a chance to be 3-0. I mean, coming off this, run of road games. And if they play like they did on Saturday night, and that's the hard thing about college football, it's that consistency week in, week out. And we see it, Miami, we'll talk about it right now. We can, lead off with that one and kind of rearrange the coast to coast briefly, but Miami, Virginia Tech, I mean, that's a prime example as we move into coast to coast, why you play every game and you better be locked in and ready. And mind you, they were at home too.
For sure, man. Miami is a team that I think everybody didn't even think it was going to be a ball game. I think they just thought they were going to run them out of Miami. And for Virginia Tech to take the 2-possession lead that they did late in the game, where it's like, oh my gosh, Virginia Tech is going to stun number 7 Miami. And Miami battled back, and they obviously won the game, whether it's controversial or not. They were able to escape with a win, and that is hard in college football. You play 12 games against yourself, yes, but when there's a lot of hype about you, you're ranked, you might not be able to handle that pressure. Like, I don't think we were in 2019 or 21. We would always get ranked, and then we would always lose 1 or 2 weeks after getting a ranking. And so it's hard when you have that target on your back. And something I was thinking about on my ride home today is it's something called law of the price tag. And the more you win, the harder it is to get the next one. It's more expensive. You have to do more because teams are going to be more excited to play you when you have a ranking next to your name.
Yeah, something that SMU is going to face in a team at Louisville. They're ranked inside the top 25 as well, coming off a loss. Not like TCU, because TCU wasn't in the top 25, but another team that you expect going in that they would give a good showing. Didn't happen from TCU. I bet it happens from Louisville. When you look at game day, college football game day, ESPN. That was the game of the weekend. And actually, because of SMU Florida State, I've had to go back and watch it in bits and pieces, and in particular, watch a lot of the reaction live as we were sitting in the press box on Twitter as this, what ended up looking like a blowout, turned into a classic clash of Titans.
For sure. But here's what's crazy. Alabama and Georgia have been dominant programs for the last, let's call it 10 years. Historically great, dominant programs. Bama improved to 9-1 over the last 10 meetings against the Bulldogs. Definitely one-sided. This is Alabama's first game against Georgia since the retirement of Nick Saban. There was a lot on the line there, and it was not easy by any means. Bama made it look easy in the first half. They jumped out to a 28-zip lead. But Georgia battled back. They do what Georgia does best, and they took the lead 34-33, 2:46 left in the ball game. Bama gets the ball back. Jalen Milroe throws a dot to Ryan Williams, the freshman, the 17-year-old, and he takes it 75 to the house. I mean, he made it look like a video game. He was making defenders run into each other. I mean, the kid is going to be a star in the making in the SEC.
Yeah, I love Ryan Williams, and he was the guy that, even though he reclassed, he was still a 5-star for us at On3. And I mean, he just put on the brakes and let those guys fly by. A total Top Gun move there, doing a little Maverick impression, letting them just run into each other, and was able to go in for the score. I mean, that 28-0 lead seemed like it was going to be insurmountable, and Georgia takes the lead. I mean, kudos to Alabama not being phased at all. I think you've got to look at Kalen DeBoer's record as a head coach and say, this is just absolutely incredible when it comes to what he's been able to do as a head coach. And, I don't know. I think Alabama's going to keep rolling.
Yeah, there were a lot of people that when Coach DeBoer took over the program, they kind of just assumed that without Nick Saban, the program would fall apart because of what he did in his 30-plus year college coaching career. But he's kept that train rolling, and hats off to him. But with it being game day, man, it's such a great tradition, and I love the fact that they had Miss Terry as the game day guest picker, and she actually outpicked Coach Saban, which was awesome. I mean, it was super fun. I can't wait for the eventual trip to Highland Park now that we're in the ACC and playing the way we are. Game day will eventually come to Dallas, but
need Pitt and SMU to take care of business, and as long as Duke maybe falters over the next couple of weeks and SMU stays hot, they might. I haven't even looked at the schedule, so people in the comments, if they want to fire back and say this game, but hey, that would be a perfect time to do it. The weather will be nice, be pretty elite weekend. So stay in the SEC, another big matchup and an upset.
Yeah, Kentucky takes down Ole Miss in Oxford. Ole Miss was obviously looked at like a team that was going to compete for a national championship, and I still think they can, but Ole Miss went 1 for 10 on third down. Yikes. Kentucky held on the ball for almost 40 minutes, and they finally got that marquee win over a big SEC power program after they nearly beat Georgia earlier in September. Ole Miss gets the ball back. They got it with 2:25 to go in the game, down 3. They drive the field and have a chance to win, but they miss a game-tying 48-yard field goal, and it pays to have good kickers. Wildcats hold on. They win 20-17, and it just proves you got to play great on special teams if you want to win in this league.
100%. And I think Mark Stoops doesn't get enough credit too. And when he turned down A&M, obviously he's got a really good situation in Kentucky. He's got no pressure. It's a basketball school. I mean, it is like outside of Duke. I mean, maybe Carolina to an extent. I mean, that's about as big of a basketball school there in Kansas as you can get. And he just goes out and gets them the bowl games. He's put guys in the league. They'll break through at some point and maybe get to an SEC title game. But, I mean, you just got to, again, give kudos to him. Tough loss to Georgia. They had them on the ropes. But I like what the Wildcats are doing this year. And they quietly are one of the best evaluators of talent over there. And I got to give a shout out to one of my guys, Greg Minuski, who I believe was still over there for that one. I actually hadn't checked, but yeah, he's still over there as a quality control guy right now. So, he just left. He's with the Broncos. So, anyway,
Nice.
Glad to see him back on the field. But he was with Kentucky the last few years, helping build up that linebacker room there for that program. So, all right, we go back the other way to the Pac-12 with Boise State and Washington State playing this one out west.
Yeah, we don't just talk about the top programs in the country on this show. So we'll talk about a new Pac-12 rivalry in the making. Boise State Broncos, Washington State Cougars. Boise State dominated the ground game. Running back Ashton Jeanty rushed for 259 and 4 touchdowns. He's emerged as a Heisman candidate. 845 yards, 13 touchdowns. They've only played 4 games so far this season. Boise State played in front of a record crowd. They had 37-7-11. Watched the Broncos beat the Cougars on the blue turf, 45-24.
Yeah, I didn't get to see that one, but you've got to give Ashton Jeanty, his flowers as well. Local boy stepping up and firmly in the Heisman Trophy race right now in the early going of the season. I always am interested to see the early Heisman picks and then what it ends up being, because I mean, history kind of suggests it's going to be somebody from a blue blood type of program with the way things usually go. Yeah, all quarterbacks, all those things.
I'm glad to see a non-quarterback stepping up and into a possible dark horse role.
Yeah, Rashard Smith, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Illinois on the road at Penn State. Another one I didn't get to see because I was at the Boulevard. I mean, not ripping it up, not doing anything crazy, but it was just an all-day affair out there, and it was a big-time atmosphere you had to get out there early for. But this was a really good game, though, and a classic Big Ten one.
Yeah, we were just having a good time on the Boulevard, man. And for all full disclosure here on this, I'm not watching all these games, start to finish. I'm watching the condensed or the highlights or things like that, and just taking my reactions off of that. But yeah, number 21 Illinois travels to number 7 Penn State. The Illini grabbed the 7-0 early lead, but then Penn State's defense stepped up and they were shut out the remainder of the ball game. Penn State played a classic Big Ten game and something that, as an offensive lineman, I love. Great defense. They ran for 239, only 34 rushing yards for Illinois. We've seen the formula multiple times this year. I keep trying to tell people, you run the ball, play great defense, you're going to win a lot of ball games. We've seen it is so hard to win in college football if you can't run the ball. Nittany Lions host UCLA for the first matchup as Big Ten conference mates this coming weekend. Should be fun. We'll see. It'll be a long trip for UCLA.
All right. Got to mention two of the favorites, as Bill Armstrong likes to say, Drizella and Anastasia. And I'll mention that TCU did win a squeaker over a highly thought of Kansas over the weekend, 38-27. I know that's an 11-point win. Frog fans settle down over there. But they were able to get a win and get back on track. But the real soap opera is unfolding in Waco, Texas.
No doubt. Struggling Baylor Bears hosted the surging BYU Cougars. And like I said earlier, man, BYU looks like the best team in the Big 12. 31-14 at half, but Baylor crawled back into this game. It was a really fun game to watch in the second half. I did watch this one. This was an 11 a.m. kick. BYU was only held to 3 second-half points, but it didn't matter, man. BYU forced a big interception on the game-winning drive for Baylor. And look, you win by 1 or you win by 100, it doesn't matter. When you're on the road, you just got to escape with a win. A win is a win when you're on the road in college football. It doesn't matter what the stat sheet says. And the more BYU wins, the better it makes SMU look. Baylor, unfortunately, man, right now, I have family that went there. One of my best friends in the world is Connor Galvin. He's a Baylor Bear. And it sucks. I've kind of kept an eye on the program, but the program is struggling. They maybe had 10,000 people in that stadium at the end of the game. I mean, Dave Aranda is on the hot seat. They won this conference in 2021, but SMU might be in a prime position to pick up the pieces if something were to happen to that staff.
Yeah, I also am feeling for a lot of the Baylor staff as well, because Kevin Curtis, who's at SMU, he's a good guy. Keenan Hall is a good guy, was at SMU. And then you also have, a bunch of people that I know covering LSU and that program that are now in Waco working for Dave, who's low-key one of the funniest guys in the business, I'll add. But
really?
Yeah. He's hilarious. Oh, man, just total prankster in the office, and I'll leave it at that. I mean, everybody is a target, and he's kind of quiet with the media. I mean, he's kind of he's just kind of different as a head coach. He's very analytical and all that stuff, but he is one funny dude. So enjoyed my time covering Dave, and when you look at what's going on over there, I mean, it's a hard situation to be in, and they try to make some changes. They brought in some new staff in the offseason, and it hasn't gone well, and that includes Keenan. And this is a program that looks like they're headed down a path where there's going to be major changes, and they have some highly touted recruits: Taz Williams, Michael Turner, Kamori Morgan, guys like that, Caleb Burns. So having a really good senior year. Probably out of all of the guys in that foursome, Caleb Burns, the Houston area linebacker, is probably having the best senior year. He's rolling. And I mean, not only that, transfers. I mean, all of those things are going to be on the table. And this is when the Sharks also start to circle, because SMU just played game 5 and sitting at 4-1. They're in a good spot. Jahari Rogers opted out. And Jahari was, he's the 5th corner on this roster. And you've got Speedy Nettles stepping up, but he's going to redshirt and go play his college football elsewhere to maybe get a fresh start, rest, and give it one more go to make it, on a roster somewhere in the league one day with some solid last film. These Baylor guys, it'll be interesting to see if any of them step out and decide to sit, because there's going to be coaching change. Some guys are going to get different opportunities to go elsewhere, or maybe impress the next staff and they want to have another year with those guys or whatever. There's just a lot going on with this in Waco.
Yeah, according to reports, 5 guys were injured in a walkthrough on Friday. I don't know if I believe that they were injured. It's probably one of those deals where they go upstairs, turn in their jersey, say, hey, I'm done for the year, I'm going to transfer. But the big news last week was UNLV quarterback Matthew Sluka. He's redshirting and he's transferring from UNLV after starting the first 3 games. And according to reports, he was promised $100K. He's only received 3, but that shouldn't be the story, man. You have a starting quarterback for the program saying, you know what, I didn't get enough NIL money. I'm done. I'm out. And if I'm one of his teammates, I'm looting his locker. Not in a way of like, give me all of his stuff, but that dude is not welcome back in my building. If you're going to quit on a team mid-season like that, man, I just don't respect that. And unfortunately, long term, I think there's eventually going to have to be legislation that gets passed about NIL. And I think binding contracts are going to have to become a real thing in college sports, where the money is laid out on the table. You know exactly what you're getting when you go there. And guys are going to have to say, hey, if I want to play, this is the team I've got to be at. Because when all this money is just getting thrown around and it feels like the Wild West still a little bit, it's hard to keep track. And it's hard to keep control.
And on top of that, I think the redshirt rule does go away as a part of that, because if they're bound to contracts to play anyway, then, they're going to have to play. And as nice as it is to redshirt someone and say, okay, we know you're going to be a 5th-year guy one day, or, maybe just take a year of development, especially, offensive line. Just a lot of the times those guys need a year, and it's nice to redshirt. But at the end of the day, too, you can't be impacted by, the little games being played to find a new spot and do all of that and sit out and ultimately hurt the coaching staff, the guys who are evaluating players, get them on there. I mean, it's kind of a cheat code to get out of a bad situation, instead of being like, all right, you got to play the whole year. And, you can, the only other option is get fake hurt, but they're going to withhold NIL money and all this stuff. It's going to, like you said, legislation is going to get involved.
No doubt. I'm a big believer in you got to finish what you start. I love this school. I love this university. There was never a thought that I would even transfer out. The portal was a thing, but I don't want to quit on my teammates, coaches, fans, all of that. I don't get that. And the guys that truly are buried on the depth chart, okay, that's one thing. But if you're a starter and you're contributing every Saturday and you got the blood, sweat, and tears involved to get wins or losses, where you're the one representing your university on national television every Saturday. So I just think it's one of those deals where it's unfortunate that this is what it's come to, but you got to get with the times or you're going to get left behind. And that's how college football really is now.
All right. Well, we about covered it, but we're going to cover more for you guys on the Pony Express podcast. We're going to preview SMU Louisville. We're going to do that Thursday night. So we're going to turn it around real quick for you guys to get that one out. But that is just how the schedule gods dished it out, especially with my travel this week. So we'll have that preview episode for you by the time you're going to the gym Friday morning to get that last lift in before game day on Saturday. So Hayden, thanks as always for jumping on. It was a great time on the Boulevard, and it's a shame that we'll have to wait a month to do it all over again in Dallas on SMU's campus. So with that, guys, for Hayden Howerton, I'm Billy Embody. Thanks for listening to this edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. We'll catch you guys later this week with another edition. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the On the Pony Express podcast with Billy Embody. Follow us on your socials on X at SMU_on3 and on Instagram at On3SMU. And keep it locked to ontheponyexpress.com for more coverage.